Hello, everybody. This is Susan Kokinda with your Midweek update. And today is December 4th. And it was just 4 weeks ago, in the early hours of Wednesday morning, that the globalist forces running our government and our media were forced to admit defeat and surrender to Donald Trump's Sherman-like march to the sea. The blue wall states fell one by one, and he rolled up the popular vote. But unlike 2016, when he was thrown headfirst into creating a new government with little preparation or experience inside the Beltway, this time Donald Trump is ready. And he's more than ready. His transition team was functioning on his own dime before he was even elected. And we've seen the results in these short 4 weeks. Last Saturday's appointment of Kash Patel as the FBI director puts the exclamation point on Donald Trump's intention to reclaim our government by taking on the entire fundamentally unconstitutional shadow apparatus, which has exercised far more power than any congressman, senator, or president has in recent decades. The effect of Trump's damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead actions has been to increasingly force this shadow apparatus and its acolytes out into the open, where we, the people, in concert with Trump's team, now have the opportunity and the responsibility to unshackle our constitutional republic and let it function as it was intended. I'm going to frame this update from the standpoint of this shadow apparatus, how it's trying to sabotage the incoming Trump administration, especially in the domain of foreign policy, and the implications of the Hunter Biden pardon in that context. But first, the immediate task at hand is to get Trump's nominees confirmed. Promethean PAC is leading a national campaign with a petition entitled Confirm Them All, which needs the broadest possible circulation. So go to our website and find links to the petition and sign up for our newsletter to keep getting vital updates on this fight. We will be directing the campaign especially at those senators who are up for re-election in 2026 and who are dragging their feet or worse on those nominations. A very good example of this is South Dakota Republican Senator Mike Rounds. Believe it or not, he just praised the role of the current FBI Director, Christopher Wray, who, as everyone knows, has been an integral part of the political witch hunt against Donald Trump. Senator Rounds suggested that Wray should serve out his 10-year term as FBI Director, which would keep him in office until 2027. All Rounds would say about Trump's pick of Kash Patel is that he, Rounds, would exercise his role to advise and consent. Meanwhile, his fellow South Dakotan, the new Senate Majority Leader John Thune, has nominally said that he's going to work with the president to get all of his nominees through, but his support for Patel has been lukewarm, as was his support for Matt Gaetz, who was subsequently forced to withdraw from consideration for Attorney General. There are other Republican senators who are up for re-election in 2026, who either need to be brought into line in full support of Trump's nominees or replaced. Those senators include Susan Collins of Maine, John Cornyn of Texas, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. That list will probably grow as the fight intensifies. Now, one new weapon that we have in this fight is Elon Musk's intention to keep his America PAC going for the purpose of primarying any Republican who does not support the president. That means that all of you American citizens out there have to be on full alert starting now to haunt your members of Congress, hold their feet to the fire of Trump's mandate, and recruit and educate qualified candidates to run against them as warranted. We stand ready to provide you with the intelligence and the tools to do that. Now, this brings me to another element of the fight here in the United States. The apparatus, which has a great deal to do with the selection and the success of candidates at the state level, whether for Congress or Senate or state legislatures, is the state Republican parties. Well, I have something to say about most, if not all of them. Houston, we have a problem. And the problem is this. President Trump, with his revival of an actually American economic and strategic policy, has, in essence, created a new Republican Party. Now, it's pretty obvious what that party is not. It's not the party of Dick Cheney or George Bush or free trade-loving corporations. It's the revolutionary Trump-drafted Republican Party platform, which says that the party must become the party of industry, manufacturing, infrastructure, and workers. And it's also the party of peace. Promethean PAC focused on that during the campaign with the circulation of a half-page flyer, which helped in the creation of a new coalition, which is what elected Donald Trump. It included blue-collar workers, Muslim and Arab Americans, other minorities, especially Hispanics, and young people. Now, the people who are part of that coalition on the ground know that this is a new Republican Party. Donald Trump and his team of outsiders like J.D. Vance, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and many of the people he's appointed also know it. In fact, they're directing it. But from what I've seen, there is probably not a single state Republican Party in the country which consciously reflects that new Republican Party. They're either stuck in legacy Republican Party policies or are in the grip of the donor and consultant classes or some combination of both. Our Promethean organizers are working with other MAGA and America First activists around the country to change that. And if you want to join with us, please sign up for our newsletter, let us know where you are, and we can work together. Now, let me move from that particular battle to the larger war. As I said at the beginning, the combination of Trump's victory, his new slate of nominees, and the actions which he has already taken are forcing the enemy apparatus more and more out of the shadows. Let's start with the pardon of Hunter Biden. The effort to protect the deep state apparatus, of which Hunter was a well-compensated player, the effort to protect that by pardoning him is, in a sense, backfiring, because the outrage over it has fueled even more exposés of the long-standing incestuous relationship between the State Department, the intelligence community, the DOD, and companies like Burisma. Mike Benz, whose knowledge of the post-war shadow foreign policy intelligence apparatus is encyclopedic, has taken the occasion of the pardon to revisit the story of U.S. foreign and military policy being shaped by the needs of the corporatist economic interests of which Burisma is just a piece. He did an extensive interview yesterday on Joe Rogan. His otherwise excellent analysis doesn't delve deeply enough into the higher levels of the British imperial command of all of this, as is too often the case, but that's where we come in. But what Benz and others are doing is dragging out into the open the creatures that dwell in the soon-to-be drained swamp. The entire apparatus of NGOs and foundations and quangos is coming out in the open. For those of you who don't know this kind of inside the Beltway speak, quangos are quasi-autonomous, non-governmental organizations. They've been around for a while, but in 1997, the British government gave quangos an official definition. Quote, a body which has a role in the processes of national government, but is not a government department or part of one, and which accordingly operates to a greater or lesser extent at arm's length from government ministers. By the way, I'll give you one guess as to who was prime minister in Britain at the time that this official definition was promulgated. It was Tony Blair. Now, one of the more notorious quangos of all time in the United States is the National Endowment for Democracy, which was founded in 1983 by the Bush apparatus, which was unfortunately already embedded in the Reagan administration. Let's go back to the question of Ukraine, Burisma, and the still looming threat of nuclear war with Russia. The infamous Victoria Nuland, who played a key role in the 2014 coup in Ukraine, which set this entire disaster into motion, has been whipping around a revolving door, going from the State Department to the National Endowment for Democracy to the State Department, and now back again to the NED as of September of this year. We endorse the American Conservatives' November 29th headline, which, referencing the Department of Government Efficiency under Musk and Vivek, the headline reads, "The Doge's best first target, the National Endowment for Democracy." So look at the destabilizations which are erupting around the world. Now, you can't really call Ukraine firing U.S. missiles into Russia a destabilization. It's actually an outright act of war. And yesterday, Tucker Carlson, broadcasting from Moscow, reported that he had just interviewed Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. As of the time of this recording, that interview hasn't been aired. But Tucker made clear in his preview the danger that the planet is in under the current regime, and that we are in reality in a hot war with Russia. In Monday's update, Barbara Boyd addressed the sudden attack on Aleppo in Syria and the long-standing role of Anglo-American sponsored networks in that theater. Now we have the crisis in South Korea with the attempt to impose martial law by the sitting president, their parliament's refusal to go along, and now the threat of impeachment. We'll have more to say on this in future updates. But I can guarantee you that it is the spider's nest of British and American intelligence operations, quangos, NGOs, foundations, etc., which are hard at work trying to make the world ungovernable before Donald Trump assumes office. But perhaps our saving grace is that at least some other world leaders, starting with Russian President Putin, have a handle on the actual dynamic afoot. Putin made some extremely important comments last week speaking in Kazakhstan. Here's what he said, referencing the Biden administration's misadventures in Ukraine. He said, "It is possible that the current administration wants to create additional difficulties for the future one. This is also possible. But as far as I can imagine, the newly elected president is an intelligent and already quite experienced person. It seems to me he will find a solution, especially after he has gone through such a, let's say, very serious test as the fight to return to the White House." Putin goes on to describe the attacks on Trump as absolutely uncivilized, up to and including attempted murder. And Putin says he doesn't think Trump is safe now. He mentions that there have been all sorts of different cases of this in the United States. And I might add as a parenthesis, our pamphlet, It is the British Who Murder U.S. Presidents, talks about some of those different cases. And while Putin says that these attacks, not only on Trump, but also on Trump's family, reflects the decline of the American political system, Putin also concludes, nevertheless, the country is great, of course, and we are ready for dialogue with the United States, including with the future administration. Putin's remarks reflect what I said in last week's update. We're in a kind of twilight zone, still gripped by the dying hand of the old evil order, with all of the dangers that that entails. But beginning to peek through the door, you can see a glorious new future for our nation and for mankind. I'm anticipating Donald Trump's attendance at the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral this weekend in Paris. Of course, it had a tragic fire 5 years ago. It's now been rebuilt. And world leaders will be gathering for the reopening, with Jill Biden standing in for her husband. Trump will be attending at the invitation of French President Macron, and some press outlets have said the pleading of French President Macron. CNN covered it with the headline, "Macron's invite shows power flowing fast from Biden to Trump." But aside from the optics, it will be interesting to see if Trump picks up on a theme he struck in January 2020, when he marched into the Serpent's Den at the World Economic Forum, and he attacked the pessimistic and anti-human view of the gathered oligarchy. He cited another great cathedral in Europe, Brunelleschi's Dome in Florence, as an example of the optimism and the creativity that makes us human. Now, it's been a brutal fight from the time that Trump made that speech in January 2020 to today, and that fight is far from over. But what will drive us to victory is a deeper understanding of that principal difference of those two views of man. One, of man as a creator and a builder, which informs our constitutional system, and the imperial view and all of the institutions and ideology which have tried to usurp our constitutional system. This has been your Midweek Update. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for your continued support. Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.